The night sky was quiet above Earth's outer defense line. Satellites floated in silence, watching the stars blink like harmless lights. But then a signal came, not from any known human outpost, but from deep space. At first, the message was just static. Then came a voice. It spoke in a strange rhythm, sharp and clicking like metal on stone. Earth's translators tried to decode it, but before they could understand the warning, fire rained from orbit. Without a declaration or demand, the sky tore open. Ships shaped like knives came through the clouds. They did not speak. They did not ask, they just attacked. Earth's defense grid lit up with panic as cities and bases burned. A swarm of insect-shaped machines stormed the ground. The invaders looked like armored beasts, with glowing eyes and limbs that sliced through steel. They did not act like soldiers. They acted like hunters. They were not there to conquer. They were there to erase the human armies fought back with everything they had. Tanks, drones, fighter jets, all launched into battle. But the enemy's technology was different. It was alive. Their weapons grew and adapted. Human bullets melted before they reached their targets. In the chaos, news spread of something terrifying. These were not just any alien invaders. They were part of the Liraki Hive, a civilization ruled by one queen, and she was here in person. Her ship had landed near the Iron Hills, hidden in the center of the battle. The queen of the Liraki was not a figure of legend. She was real. 8 feet tall, wrapped in living armor that healed itself. She could speak inside minds and bend gravity with her staff. Wherever she walked, human soldiers fell back in fear. But in the middle of all this death, one man stood out. His name was Darren Cale, a former field medic turned soldier. He was stationed at Forward Base Delta when the attack came. The base didn't survive. Few did. But Darren did something no one else dared. He saw wounded soldiers under fire. He ran into collapsing buildings to carry them out. He dragged one man across open ground under a burning sky. Then he saw her, not a human, but a Liraki. Wounded, bleeding green, her breathing weak and irregular. Darren lifted his weapon to finish her. But he didn't shoot. Her eyes opened. Not with hate, but confusion and pain. She tried to speak, but only a soft clicking came. She was the enemy. But she was also dying. And Darren didn't leave the dying behind. The rest of his unit shouted for him to leave her. The battle was moving. But Darren lifted her body and carried her away from the fire. His mind screamed it was wrong. His orders said she was the reason. Earth was burning. But his hands didn't listen. He walked for hours. No transport, no cover. Just him and the enemy queen, unconscious in his arms. He didn't know who she was. He only knew she was alive. And as a medic, that was enough. He didn't know that every step he took was changing the war. Far above, Liraki commanders scanned for their queen. Her signal was lost. They thought she was dead. They raged across continents, looking for answers. But she was in the arms of the very species they came to destroy. Darren found shelter in a collapsed farming outpost. No power, no radio, just broken walls and scattered supplies. He laid her down on a table and began treating her wounds. Her skin was thick, but under it was something delicate, almost human. He tried human medicine, and some of it worked. She flinched once. Then her breathing calmed. Her strange armor twitched like it wanted to fight, but it was weak now. For the first time, Darren saw something new in the war. A moment that felt different, in the quiet between attacks, under the cracked ceiling of a forgotten building. A human soldier cleaned the wounds of an alien queen. He didn't ask why. He didn't expect thanks. He just worked, because that's what humans did when someone was hurt. And outside, the war raged louder than ever, with neither side knowing the future was already starting to change. The cold. Night wrapped around the broken outpost. Wind pushed through cracks in the walls. carrying dust and smoke from faraway explosions. Darren sat beside the strange alien queen, checking the bandages he had made from old cloth and medical foam. She was still unconscious, but breathing steady. Her chest rose and fell slowly, as if her body was trying to heal itself. Darren wiped green blood from her neck and watched it glow faintly on his fingers. He had never seen anything like it. He didn't know her name or rank. He didn't know if she would kill him when she woke. All he knew was that she wasn't dead yet, and that meant she still had a chance. That was all a medic needed to keep going. He used his last injection of painkiller on her leg wound. The alien armor had fused with her skin, but it was pulling back now, almost like it trusted him. Darren didn't say anything. He just worked in silence, while outside the war roared on. The outpost shook once when a blast hit somewhere nearby. Dust fell from the ceiling. Darren didn't flinch. He looked down at the queen. Her eyes moved slightly under closed lids. Something inside her was fighting to wake up. In the darkness, he heard footsteps crunching on gravel. Darren grabbed his rifle and turned toward the door. His heart pounded. If it was a scout unit, he'd be shot on sight. He waited, holding his breath and watching the shadows. But it wasn't soldiers. Just a wild animal, thin and scared, limping through the debris. It looked at him, sniffed the air, then ran off into the ruins. Darren lowered his weapon and sat back down. For now he was still alone. He found an old canteen under a desk and drank what little water remained. Then he poured some into a dented cup and placed it near her lips. She didn't drink, but her eyes fluttered. The green glow beneath her skin flickered once. Hours passed. The war outside kept burning. He heard distant screams and the roar of engines. Darren stared at the queen, wondering what she had done to earn such loyalty. Her people were tearing Earth apart just to find her. He remembered something an officer once said during a mission briefing. The Liraki queens weren't just rulers. They were connected to their swarm by something more than command. Their thoughts echoed through every soldier. If she died, the swarm would rage. And if she lived, maybe something would change. Maybe the hive could be reasoned with. Maybe the killing would stop. Darren didn't believe in miracles, but right now, that queen was the only thing in the universe more valuable than a warship. He checked her wounds again. The healing had sped up. Her breathing was stronger now. She was fighting back, but not against him. Against whatever poison or blast had nearly taken her life. Darren watched her fingers twitch once, then curl slowly. Then her eyes opened, glowing, sharp, inhuman, but not filled with hate. She stared at him in silence. Darren didn't move. He raised his empty hands to show he meant no harm. The queen blinked slowly, studying him like a scientist observing a strange creature. She tried to speak, but only a weak clicking sound came. Darren pointed to his chest. "Darren," he said. Then he pointed at her. "You?" She blinked again. Then she reached for her throat, her hand trembling, and whispered one word inside his mind. "Yalzek," the voice said, not through her mouth, but in his head. It was smooth, like wind passing over metal. He felt a strange warmth in his skull, like someone had opened a door in the back of his thoughts. Darren didn't run. He didn't panic. He simply nodded. "Okay, Yalzek," he said. "You're safe here." Her eyes closed again, but her breathing stayed strong. He knew now that she was aware. She understood what he was doing. And she didn't resist. Storm outside would find them soon. Darren had to move again before the drone scanned the area. But something told him the queen couldn't travel far without rest. He had saved her life, but now he had to keep it safe. He packed what little he had into a small bag. Bandages, water, one last energy bar. Then he wrapped her in thermal cloth, checked his rifle, and took a deep breath. He would carry her again, not because she was an alien, but because she was alive. And behind him, the night burned with war, while ahead waited the longest walk of his life. Darren moved before the sun came up. The sky was still dark, and the fires in the distance lit the horizon like a warning. He had wrapped the alien queen in thermal cloth, but her body was still cold to the touch. He lifted her carefully. Her armor was lighter now, no longer hard and sharp. It seemed to sense her weakness and adjust. Her face remained calm, eyes closed, lips barely moving. Darren carried her like he had carried wounded soldiers before. The ground was cracked and covered in ash. Trees were burned to stumps. No birds, no insects, only silence and smoke. Every step Darren took made his back scream, but he didn't stop. She needed to be far away from the battlefield. He didn't know where he was going. Maps were useless now. Cities had fallen. Roads were blocked. Still, he kept moving west, toward the mountains. If he reached the old ranger station, maybe he could call for help. Maybe someone would listen. Yalzak, the queen, stirred once in his arms. Her fingers moved slightly, brushing against his jacket. She didn't speak again, but he felt her presence in the back of his mind. It was like a distant light, weak but growing brighter. He paused near a destroyed convoy. Burned-out tanks and broken mechs lay in the dirt, their metal twisted from plasma fire. Darren searched the wreckage for supplies. He found a small first aid kit and half a protein bar still in its wrapper. He fed her tiny pieces of the bar. She didn't chew, just swallowed slowly. Her breathing remained steady. She was surviving, but barely. Whatever her species used for strength, it wasn't food alone. Something deeper was keeping her alive. Suddenly a noise echoed through the air. A scanner drone flew overhead, buzzing like a swarm of bees. Darren dropped flat behind a wrecked vehicle, shielding her with his body. The drone passed without slowing, but he stayed down for 5 full minutes. Then he rose and kept walking. Every part of him ached. His feet bled. His arms trembled. Still, he carried her. She had not ordered him. She had not begged. But he couldn't leave her. She was his patient now, even if she was a queen. By midday, the heat became unbearable. Darren stopped under the shade of a half-burned tree. He poured water into a cloth and wiped her face. Her skin shimmered faintly, glowing under the sunlight. She was beautiful in a strange, haunting way. She opened her eyes again. This time, they held more focus. He saw her mouth form silent words. Her mind touched his again, but softer this time. He didn't understand everything, but one word echoed clearly inside his thoughts. Why? Darren sat beside her and looked at the ruined land around them. Because you're not dead, he said. That's reason enough. She blinked. Once, then twice. Her hand rested lightly against his chest, and for a moment, she didn't seem like the enemy. They stayed there for an hour. Then the sounds of movement came from behind the hills. Darren stood up quickly. It wasn't a drone. It was heavier. Maybe a scout team, maybe worse. He didn't wait to find out. He lifted her again and moved on. The path ahead turned rough. Rocks cut his boots. Branches clawed at his arms. The queen's weight slowed him down, but he adjusted. Each step became a promise. He didn't know her story. She didn't know his. But their lives were now tied together. He passed a field of shattered bones. Human. Liraki. Mixed. The war had not spared anyone. He stepped carefully, head bowed. Yalzak opened her eyes briefly and closed them again. Maybe she remembered the fight. Maybe she regretted nothing. He didn't ask. At last the trees opened into a narrow valley. In the distance stood a building. The old ranger station. It looked mostly intact. Darren felt a surge of hope. If the radio still worked, he could call for evac. He could get her out. He reached the door and kicked it open. Dust flew everywhere. Inside was empty, but not destroyed. The signal tower in the back still stood. Darren laid her down gently on a cot and rushed to the control panel. His fingers flew across the buttons. The screen blinked. Power came on. Static buzzed from the speakers. Then a voice answered, weak but real. Identify, it said. Darren stared at Yalzek. Her eyes met his. He knew what this moment meant. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a choice. He turned to the mic and spoke. This is Corporal Darren Kale. I have a wounded Liraki queen in my care. She is alive. She is not hostile. Requesting medical evac and immediate ceasefire request relay. The silence that followed felt like it stretched across the planet. Then the voice replied, uncertain but calm. Repeat transmission. Did you say queen? Darren nodded, even though no one could see him. Yes, she's in my arms. And I'm not letting go. Asterisk. The silence after Darren's call felt heavier than the sky itself. The radio crackled again, but no new voice came, only static and broken signals. He stood there, breathing hard, watching Yalzek's chest rise and fall on the cot. She looked stronger now. Her skin had more color, and her breathing was deeper. The glow from under her armor was steady. Darren checked her pulse, and for the first time since he found her, it felt normal. The door creaked open behind him. He turned fast, rifle aimed, but it was just wind. Still, he closed it tight and blocked it with an old desk. He didn't trust silence anymore. Too many times it came before violence. He found a blanket in the back room and placed it over Yalzek. She shifted slightly, her hands twitching. Then she opened her eyes, calm but sharp. She stared at him as if measuring the truth of his actions. He didn't speak. He just nodded once. She blinked slowly, and then he felt it. Her voice in his head again, clear and direct. I sense confusion. You protect the enemy. Why, Darren sat down across from her. He looked at his hands, still dirty and cut. Because not everyone who looks like a monster is one, he said. And not everyone who fights is evil. Some just follow orders. Like me. Her eyes narrowed. You act without command. You risk death. You resist fear. That is not logic. That is something else, Darren shrugged. It's being human, he said. Sometimes we do the right thing even when it makes no sense. Especially when it makes no sense. Yalzek looked away for a moment. Through the broken window, she could see fire in the sky. The war hadn't stopped. Her people were still searching. For her, Darren could feel her concern without words. Your soldiers will come, he said. If they find me, they'll kill me. If my people get here first, they'll kill you. We're standing in the middle of a storm, and no one knows the wind is changing. She touched her chest lightly. You are not wrong. The hive moves with rage. If they think I am dead, they will not stop. They will burn everything. Darren stood up and walked to the radio again. Then you need to tell them you're alive. You need to speak. Show them you're not their prisoner. You're healing because someone cared. Not because someone captured you. She struggled to sit up, groaning from pain. Darren rushed to help her, and she allowed it. Her hand rested on his shoulder as she sat upright. Her armor shifted, forming a small crystal at her throat that began to glow. This is my signal, she said. If I send it, they will know I live. They will come. But they may not understand. They will see you and act without mercy. Then you need to make them understand before they land, Darren said. We're out of time. Either we talk, or we all die. She looked into his eyes. For a moment, nothing moved. Then she nodded. The crystal glowed brighter. She closed her eyes and sent the pulse. It was silent to human ears, but echoed across the sky like a beacon. Far above, Liraki warships turned in formation. Their queen's life signal had returned. Commanders screamed orders. Swarms changed direction. The rage that fueled them paused. For the first time since the war began, Darren watched the sky through a broken window. He saw lights shifting. A sound of distant engines filled the air. They were coming fast. He gripped his rifle tighter, unsure if they would listen or shoot on sight. Yalzek stood slowly, leaning on him for balance. They will come to me. I will speak for you. But if they sense threat, they will destroy this place. And you, I'll... Take that chance, Darren said. I've come too far to stop now. If you want peace, this is the only road left. The building shook as the first shadow passed overhead. A huge Liraki dropship hovered above the station. More followed. The ground trembled as landing legs crushed the earth around them. Darren helped Yalzek walk outside. The wind from the engines tore at his coat. Alien soldiers formed a wall of black armor, weapons raised. They aimed at him without question. Yalzek raised one hand and spoke in a voice that echoed through every mind present. He is not the enemy. He is the reason I live. Stand down. No one moved. Tension cracked like ice. Darren kept his hands open, eyes on the leader. Then, slowly the weapons lowered. The line of soldiers parted. One stepped forward and knelt before the queen. She nodded. Once, then leaned against Darren again. You carried me 40 miles through war. You saved a queen. Now I will save your planet. The Liraki soldiers surrounded the station in complete silence. Their glowing weapons stayed pointed low, but ready. They did not speak with words. They waited for their queen's command like statues carved from metal. Yalzek stood tall beside Darren, though her body still showed signs of injury. Her armor had returned to full strength, wrapping her in shifting plates that shimmered with power. She no longer looked like a patient. She looked like a ruler. Darren remained close to her. Sighed. His rifle was strapped to his back, his hands open. He didn't flinch under the watchful eyes of the alien swarm. He had already made his choice. He wasn't turning back. One of the larger Liraki stepped forward. He had no visible mouth, but when he spoke, the voice echoed in every mind around them. You live. We feared your end. We were ready to burn their world for your silence. Yalzek answered without hesitation. I was not taken. I was saved. By him. A human who gave me life when others would have ended it. The war must stop. His kind is not what we believed. The soldiers shifted slightly, confused by her words. Some seemed to hesitate. Others looked ready to question. Darren could feel the tension crawling in the air like fire waiting to catch wind. He stepped forward and raised his voice. I don't know why your kind came here. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was power. But now you have a choice. You can keep destroying. Or you can listen to the one you serve. The large Liraki stared at him, unmoving. One human act does not erase your species' violence. Your kind burned our colonies. You polluted space with noise. You broke the balance. Yalzek raised her hand to silence him. No more revenge, no more fire. We cannot punish all for the actions of few. I saw mercy in a place of death. That truth changes everything. Darren looked up at the sky where more ships circled above. You came to destroy, but you found a reason to pause. That's rare in war. Don't waste it. Talk to your leaders. Talk to mine. There's still time to stop the bleeding. Yalzek turned to her soldiers and spoke again, her voice like thunder in their minds. Prepare a transmission. Open a line to the Terran command. Let the leaders speak. Let the fire rest. The soldier, who had doubted her, stepped back and bowed. Another activated a device from his chest, and a blue sphere of energy formed above the ground. Inside it flickered the image of Earth's Defense Council chamber. Voices burst through the link. Human generals, advisors, and diplomats shouted over one another. Then they saw Yalzek. Then they saw Darren beside her. And for the first time since the war began, silence filled the room. This is Queen Yalzek of the Liraki Hive, she said. Calmly, you have shown cruelty. We have returned it. But this man, she placed her hand on Darren's shoulder. has reminded me that mercy is a power greater than destruction. The Terran commander leaned forward in the feed. Why should we believe you? Darren stepped into the feed. Because she had every chance to kill me. But she didn't. And I had every reason to walk away. But I didn't. We chose something else. Maybe you can too. The feed flickered. Then the council whispered among themselves. Then came a single answer. We will begin talks. But the war halts now. No more attacks. No more fire. Not one more. Death. Yalzek closed her eyes and let the message ripple through her hive. Every ship paused. Every Liraki soldier froze in place. Across the planet, the fighting stopped in seconds. Not because of fear, but because of a single voice calling for peace. Darren felt the weight of it all crash into him. He fell to one knee, not from pain, but from release. The battle inside him had ended. He looked at Yalzek and for the first time, he saw her smile. The Liraki soldiers lowered their weapons completely. One by one, they turned away from the station and began to move back toward their ships. They did not vanish. They simply waited for what came next. Yalzek stayed behind with Darren. Your world is not safe yet, but today, it is spared. You did what no army could. You changed a queen's heart. Darren looked at the horizon, now quiet and strange without the sound of war. Then let's keep going. Peace doesn't build itself. The war stopped, but peace was not yet certain. Across Earth, soldiers lowered their weapons, unsure whether to celebrate or prepare for another strike. The silence after violence was always the most dangerous moment. Darren stayed near Yalzek while the diplomats and commanders argued through secure channels. Their voices passed through static and mistrust. Every word weighed like it carried a knife. But both sides kept talking, and that was something. They had moved from the ranger station to a neutral zone, an old medical shelter on the edge of the mountain ridge. It was surrounded by human guards and watched from above by Liraki drones. Neither side fully trusted the other yet. Yalzek's condition improved quickly. Her body healed faster than any human could, thanks to the living armor that had once nearly died with her. Now it flowed across her skin like molten metal, a sign of her growing strength. She spent long hours speaking with her commanders through the hive mind. They didn't question her survival anymore. They had seen the broadcast. They had heard her words. But old instincts still whispered of war. Darren watched her every day. He stayed close but never too close. He didn't speak unless spoken to. But Yalzek often called for him when no one else could help her think clearly. His presence reminded her of what she had nearly lost. Sometimes, they walked the damaged paths outside the shelter. The ground was still scarred with craters, but small green shoots poked through the cracks. Life was returning, slowly, silently, like hope. One morning, Yalzek handed him a strange device. This holds what we are, our history, our knowledge. You should know who we were before we became a swarm of blades. Darren studied the glowing cube in his hands. It felt warm and light. You sure your people want me to have this? They do not, she said. But I do. Peace must be more than words. It must be built from truth. Inside the shelter, a large screen displayed the early agreements between both species. Ceasefire lines, joint cleanup zones, plans for rebuilding. It was fragile, thin as glass. But it was real, both sides agreed. To a guarded summit, held in a ruined human city recently cleared of debris. Leaders from Earth and the Liraki hive would meet face to face. The world held its breath, unsure what would happen next. Darren was not invited at first. He was a soldier, not a diplomat. But Yalzek made it clear that without him, she would not attend. So he came, wearing his old field uniform and a fresh wound on his cheek from a training accident. The city was quiet when they arrived. The buildings were cracked, but banners of both empires hung from metal poles. Armed guards stood along every wall, but their weapons remained on safety. The air buzzed with tension and history. Inside a large dome at the city's center, the summit began. Yalzek walked ahead with her head held high. Darren followed one step behind her, watched by every camera and every pair of human eyes in the room. The Terran president stood across from them. Flanked by generals and ministers, no one moved at first. Then the president stepped forward and extended a hand. Queen Yalzek. Welcome to Earth. Yalzek looked at the hand, then took it gently. President Lang, may our talks be stronger than our weapons. Darren stood between two worlds. He wasn't sure what would happen after the summit. Maybe it would fail. Maybe the war would return. But in that moment, he felt something that had not existed since the first shots were fired. He felt the weight of survival becoming the shape of change. The talks continued for hours. There were arguments, pauses, and raised voices. But there was also understanding. They spoke of the dead, of the damage, of the reasons behind every order and every mistake. Yalzek admitted her fear of human unpredictability. The swarm had attacked because it saw humans as unstable, too emotional, too wild. But now she realized that emotion was not always a flaw. Sometimes it was the path to something greater. Darren spoke when asked. He didn't use big words. He just told them what he did. Why he carried her, why he didn't shoot. And in his voice, even the most skeptical began to listen. By nightfall, the first agreement was signed. It was not peace yet, but it was a road to peace. One built by hands that had once held weapons and now reached for something better. As the stars appeared in the sky above the ruined city, Darren stepped outside alone. He looked up and breathed deeply. The air still smelled of smoke, but also of soil and growing things. Yalzek joined him quietly. You are a strange creature, Darren Kale, but your kind may yet surprise us all. Weeks passed since the summit, and both worlds worked with care and suspicion. Earth's skies were quieter now, but not free. Liraki ships still watched from above, and human satellites tracked their every move. Yalzek returned to her people, but not to command war. She led teams to help repair what had been broken. Her swarm brought healing drones, machines that rebuilt cities and cleaned poison from the soil. The same hands that once destroyed were now restoring. Darren was offered medals, promotions, and titles. He accepted none. Instead, he chose to join a new task force designed to train peacekeepers. Not soldiers, not spies, but humans and Liraki working side by side to prevent future war. He lived near the edge of a rebuilt zone, where the air still smelled like ash, but the sky was beginning to clear. The land bore scars, but wildflowers had begun pushing through the cracks. They reminded him that nothing stayed dead forever. Yalzek visited often. Their meetings were quiet. They did not speak like rulers or heroes. They spoke like people who had carried pain and chosen not to pass it forward. Every time they met, the silence between them felt more peaceful than any treaty. One evening, as they walked near the river, Yalzek paused to watch a group of human children play near the water. They laughed without fear. No guards, no drones, just joy. That sound, she said, is worth more than any throne. Darren smiled but said nothing. He had seen too much to take peace for granted. He still checked the sky before sleeping, still flinched at thunder. But when he saw those children, even his breath came easier. News came that one Liraki commander had refused Yalzek's orders and launched a small strike on a human outpost. No one died, but the act sparked fire inside both governments. War nearly returned with a single choice. Yalzek flew to the council herself and stripped the commander of rank in front of thousands. Her message was clear. Peace was not weakness. It was strength held by those who had already survived hell and chose not to return to it. Darren watched the broadcast from his small outpost. He felt pride and fear mixed inside him. Pride in what she had done. Fear that one mistake could still burn the bridge they had built. He walked outside and looked at the horizon. The sun was setting behind the hills. He thought about the first time he carried her through the fire, about the blood on her armor and the silence in her breath. That moment still lived in him. Now she stood before the galaxy and declared a new path, one not paved by death, but by risk. Trust was always a risk, but she had taken it. So had he. And it had changed everything. The next morning, a Liraki transport arrived to take Darren to the Hive homeworld. Yalzek had requested his presence for the first joint remembrance ceremony, a place where both species would honor their fallen together. He packed nothing special. Just the cube she had once given him and a photo of his old unit. The rest he carried in his mind, faces of soldiers, voices lost to smoke, and the promise he made under a broken sky. The journey through space was quiet. The stars outside the window looked the same as before, but now he felt closer to them. Not because they had changed, but because he had. The Hive world was vast and strange. Towers grew like trees. The ground pulsed with soft energy. Everything moved in rhythm, as if the planet breathed. Darren walked beside Yalzek through halls of light and shadow. She brought him to a vast chamber where both human and Liraki banners hung side by side. In the center stood a memorial flame, surrounded by names carved in stone. Some names were human. Some were not. But all were equal. He stepped forward and placed the photo of his unit at the edge of the flame. Yalzek placed a shard of her broken armor beside it. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing left to explain. A choir of voices began to sing, low, soft, haunting. It was the sound of memory, the sound of those who never returned, but also the sound of those who remained to tell their story. Darren stood in silence, his eyes wet but unashamed. He didn't cry for sorrow. He cried for survival, for connection, for the strange and impossible path that brought him here. And beside him stood a queen who once brought death, now a guardian of peace. The ceremony ended in silence. No applause. No cheering, just stillness. The kind that came after truth was spoken and understood. Darren stood beside the flame as the crowd began to leave, one step at a time. He didn't follow them. He remained there, staring at the shard of armor Yalzek had placed beside the photo of his unit. The broken piece still held scars from when he first saw her lying in smoke and ash. Yalzek approached quietly and stood next to him. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. They had said everything that mattered without words. Darren finally turned to her and nodded once, a gesture full of meaning only they could share. Later, they walked through the Hive gardens. The plants glowed with soft colors. Every flower seemed alive with memory. Some opened when they passed. Others pulsed gently under their feet. Nothing here was grown without purpose. Will your people accept this? Yalzek asked. The peace, the memory, the change, they already are, Darren replied. Not all at once, not easily. But they see the difference now. You can't unsee mercy. Not after war. She paused by a fountain made of living crystal. Water moved upward instead of down. In its reflection, they both looked older, worn, but stronger. Not from power, from choice. There will still be voices who want revenge, she said. In your world and mine, yes, Darren answered. But they'll be quieter every year, because louder than hate is the memory of what it cost. The sun began to rise over the Hive city. Its light spread across towers and tunnels, filling the air with golden warmth. Darren felt it touch his skin like something clean after a long storm. A group of Liraki children passed by, laughing as they chased small floating lights. One of them stopped and looked up at him, eyes wide with curiosity. Darren smiled, and the child smiled back. Moments like that felt more powerful than any treaty. He didn't need to write laws or give speeches. His presence here was the proof. He was the human who carried the queen through war and lived to see peace bloom. When he returned to Earth days later. The atmosphere felt different. Soldiers saluted him. Civilians nodded with quiet respect. But no one treated him like a hero. They treated him like a bridge. He gave speeches only when asked. He spoke in schools, in camps, in halls where survivors gathered. He didn't speak of glory. He spoke of choice. Of the moment he saw his enemy bleeding and decided to save her. Years passed. The wounds of war faded, though scars remained. Not all cities were rebuilt. Not all families healed. But humanity had survived, and so had the hive. Together, they began building something new. Trade began first, then science. Then shared schools and mixed crews on deep space missions. Suspicion never vanished completely, but it no longer ruled the skies. What ruled now was purpose. Darren never returned to the battlefield. He had already fought his greatest war, the one inside his own heart. Instead, he became an ambassador, not by title, but by example. His life was the message. Yalzek ruled differently now. Not with commands shouted into the minds of her people, but with questions, with listening. She led not as a weapon, but as a guide. Her hive followed because they chose to, not because they were programmed. Every year, on the anniversary of the ceasefire, they met at the place where Darren had first carried her. The ruins were gone now. A great silver tree stood there, its roots wrapped around both human stone and alien crystal. They didn't bring crowds. They didn't give speeches. They just stood there together. Two beings who had once belonged to opposite ends of a dying galaxy, now united by a choice that changed the stars. One year, a child came running to the tree. Half human, half Liraki, a product of the new world. The child looked up at them and asked, "Is it true? You carried her through the fire." Darren knelt down. "Yes," he said, "and she spared my world." The child blinked. "Why?" Yalzek answered. "Because life is not something we take. It is something we protect." And with that, the child smiled and ran back to play beneath the tree. Darren and Yalzek watched the future run on young legs, free from war, filled with wonder. They stood together as the wind carried petals through the air. No guards, no guns. Only peace earned by pain, carried by choice, and kept by memory. And in the center of it all, a queen and a soldier stood as proof that even in the darkest of wars, humanity could still choose to be more.